The story begins by introducing Van, a 2-year-old child who regains the memories of his past life, in which he was a salaried worker in Japan who always left work late. A maid named Till, seeing him so close to the window, becomes worried and approaches him to move him away, surprised that Van can now speak more fluently. After that, we move to the dining room, where we meet Van's father, the Marquis of Furcio named Jalpo, and his brothers Mercia, Jard, and Sesto. Van is pampered and fed by the maids. In the middle of this, Jalpo asks Jard and Sesto what they plan to do. The brothers, feeling tense, reply that they will study some magic. Then Jalpo asks Van the same question, and Van replies that he is first interested in learning about the history and culture of the kingdom. Jalpo laughs, impressed by the answer of his youngest son, and places his trust in him. Since this is an ice sky, there must be magic, and the 4 main elements are fire, water, wind, and earth. To protect the people, it is essential that the nobility master offensive elements. Those who possess aptitudes for other elements are considered a disgrace. Later, Van is found in the library, surrounded by his maids, learning a bit about magic. Suddenly, Espada appears, a butler who has served his father for decades. He will now also be in charge of educating him. In just 1 week, Van manages to learn how to read and write using the characters of that world. 2 years later, Van begins training in swordsmanship. By the age of 5, he already had the ability to fight against older military children. Being a child prodigy, they want him to study while also training with the sword. D, the vice commander of the Knights, begins to train him. Van suffers from how exhausting the routine is, but in the end he feels that he is enjoying himself much more than in his previous life, and will enjoy his new life in that world to the fullest. Another year passes, following the same routine as always. Studying and training every day is overwhelming him, so he decides to be lazy for once, and asks Till to take him to see the market. Van is amazed by the place's infrastructure, and while walking through it, they come across an abusive father who wants to sell his own son as a slave, because in that world, poor families sell the children they cannot support in order to survive. A woman named Rosoli appears upon noticing Van's presence. She is glad that he is in the area and invites him to visit the Merry Company, a large mercantile company with branches throughout the kingdom. Van asks Rosoli how much the child the man is selling might cost. Rosoli asks about the child's magical aptitude, and the man replies that he has the magical aptitude of stealing. Rosoli says that he is not even worth 3 large silver coins. The man gets angry with his son over this and begins to beat him in front of everyone. Van decides to give him 5 large silver coins. The man takes them and runs away, leaving his son behind. Van takes the slave's hand and asks his name. He replies that his name is Cam Shin. Van says that he is now free and can go wherever he wants, but since he has nowhere to go, Van decides to take him to the mansion. However, his father would not allow someone of unknown origin to enter. On the other hand, if he goes as Van's slave, it would be permitted. Cam Shin has no problem going as a slave, since in the end he was sold as one. Rosoli performs the pact between master and slave, placing a mark on Cam Shin's hand. The next day, we see Cam Shin already cleaned up. He informs Van that the Knight D is looking for him to train. Van does not want to attend and asks Cam Shin to lie, saying that he is not there. Cam Shin goes out and lies for him, but D, in that case, decides to take him instead to train him. Sometime later, and at only 8 years old, Van has become known as a kind noble, earning the affection of his own people for treating them equally. But the time has come to evaluate what magical aptitude Van will have. To his surprise, he was not able to inherit the elemental aptitude like his brothers. Instead, he obtained production magic, which is considered the most pathetic of all magics, because with it, materials are created, and imagination is used to create swords or jewelry. But all of that can already be done without magic. Jalpo is disappointed, because both he and his late wife were powerful fire mages. His disappointment reaches the point where he is willing to kill Van in order to cover up the shame. However, Mercia, his eldest son, intervenes. He mentions an undeveloped border village. He wants Van to be sent to that inhospitable place with only 100 inhabitants. Jalpo remembers that this territory is not very loyal to him, and if they send a member of the family, they may be able to regain its trust. That is why he decides to follow his eldest son's advice and leaves the room. Mercia apologizes to Van for making such an absurd proposal. but it was the only way to save him. Van thanks him for saving his life. The next day, he prepares everything to depart for the border village. He feels happy because in that rural area, he will live relaxed and in peace. At first, he was only allowed to take Kam Shin with him, but his brother Mercia arranged everything and secured 10 adventurers to escort him. Till does not want to abandon him and decides to go with him, as does D, assuring him that he will teach him everything he knows about the sword. D brings along 2 knights named Arb and Lo. Espada also brings his retirement forward to spend his old age educating Van. With this, the calm and relaxed life he had imagined disappears. Jalpo ordered the removal of the house banners from the carriage, so that no one would realize he was banishing his son, but D made sure to tell everyone that Van was leaving. Since he is so beloved in the city, everyone gathered to give him a farewell. On the way, Van uses his production magic, transforming a small branch into a dagger of the same size. He wants to practice a little to find a good use for his aptitude. When they are about to arrive, they realize that the village is being attacked. They stop to decide whether they should fight or not. D proposes fighting, but the leader of the adventurers, named Otto, refuses, mainly because there are many bandits, and they were only hired to escort a carriage. D still wants to face them, but Espada intervenes, saying that if he were to die, the village would have no future without him. He also comments that he is a mage who can control the 4 elements. With his help and a well-planned strategy, they could win. Van realizes that Espada is planning to sacrifice himself, so he tries to act on his own, becoming the bait so that they can launch a surprise attack. Otto recognizes that Van is not like the other nobles, and decides to take his place to protect him. D gets excited and moves ahead, just like Espada, who now proposes another strategy. Together, they manage to defeat most of the bandits and capture those who tried to escape, without suffering any casualties. Otto has completed his mission, but he has decided to stay a little longer to see how Van prospers in the village. His companions also decide to stay with him, even though they will earn less, because they are curious. After that, Van introduces himself to Rhonda, the chief of the village, who thanks him for saving them. He realizes that the village's situation is very serious, because they have been forgotten by the Marquis. Van apologizes and promises to improve the village for the good of everyone. But that does not convince the chief very much, until Espada and D speak up, giving them more peace of mind, knowing that such important people are with them. However, they become suspicious again when they realize that Van has production magic. For the moment, Van orders Espada to raise a provisional stone wall around the village, and the knights to create pits and traps for intruders. After that, Van uses his production magic to create a fiber block. Using wood, he creates many more blocks. Otto wants to see how resistant it is, and realizes that it is a lightweight material. When he tries to cut it with his sword, he is surprised to find that it is extremely tough. Several hours pass, and Van has been turning the fiber blocks into combat weapons. At night, Van feels tired because, since the journey began, they have been sleeping outdoors. So, the next day, he stacks many fiber blocks and concentrates on creating his own house using his magic. Everyone is amazed to see the mansion that a child of only 8 years old was able to build.